London calling, David Loyn. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you, Stewart.
Fine, let's go ahead then. Amazingly, we can talk to you on this phone, but we can't play your DVD. So I think the issue, I think the issues I'd like to discuss.
I could read the whole script from here. Tell me.
Yeah, I know. Okay, let's first of all talk about the conditions under which you did this. And by that I mean, when you talked to the Taliban about the opportunity to do this, what were their conditions to you about if they allowed you to travel with them? What, if anything, did you have to do in return?
Only I promised not to divulge exactly where I had been. I met them in 2 different locations in Afghanistan, and there was a trust on both sides. I trusted them not to kill me, and they trusted me not to bring an airstrike down on them. And that was the only condition that they laid down.
The line's not perfect, but as I understand you to say there was a question of they were trusting you, and to a certain extent you were trusting them. There were no conditions, other than that you didn't give away their position. Is that right?
Exactly. That was the only condition. Otherwise, I was able to talk to any of the Taliban I was with. Their main military commander, who's the man who's running the war against the British in Helmand, would not appear on camera, but I talked at length to him and quoted him in a radio piece and pieces that I wrote, and others of their commanders spoke on television. And the really important thing about this was that it wasn't a platform for them, but it was an opportunity to say, why are you burning down schools? Where have you come from? Why are you re-recruiting? And to give them an opportunity to say who they are. In the interview on Newsnight following my report, there was a defense minister who said this was not good journalism because we know what the Taliban think. And I don't think we do know what the new Taliban think. I think they have changed since I last spent a lot of time with them in the late 90s. And it was an opportunity to challenge exactly where they've come from, why they're recruiting, and why they've become so strong, as well as to see the extent of the ground that they cover, the kind of weapons that they've got, their morale, the sort of men that they are. I mean, all of those, I think, were very interesting aspects of the report.
Yes, I agree. There were a number of news points in the report, for instance, the tactic of using suicide bombers more and things like that. On this issue of conditions, though, in the piece which you wrote for Frontline, you talked about conditions which the BBC set, or particularly legal ones, and you said that as long as you didn't witness any attacks, you would be in the clear. Could you explain what you meant by that?
Well, there was, as you know, there's a new Anti-Terrorism Act, but these were not terrorists in the sense that's covered by the Act. And, since no one's come at me since, that seems to be good guidance. But also, I think they felt that in terms of public policy, that a publicly funded broadcaster couldn't be seen to be having a reporter involved in any acts which were against British soldiers. So the key condition that was laid down by the BBC's lawyers was that if I shouldn't hear about anything that was going to happen in the future. If I stumbled on planning for a future attack on a British base, then I would legally have to go to the authorities with that. So I shouldn't hear any of those kinds of things.
But there's one section of the report, if I remember right, where you say that you filmed a conversation between a Taliban and somebody else about possible action that would be taken against an informer, or some words, a collaborator of some kind like that. So in a sense, weren't you then witnessing possible action, if not against British troops, terrorist action against somebody else?
If you want, terrorist is a word I'm not very comfortable with in almost any context. I think it's something that people use against other people. It's not a word that I would try and use in a BBC report. Yes, I did overhear a conversation but I didn't know the individual that they were talking about, and actually I filmed that conversation, but it wasn't translated to me until later. What I filmed was somebody on the radio on a two-way radio talking to somebody else. It was only when I got back that I realised what it was that he'd been talking about.
Okay, you talked about your interview with the Taliban spokesman, I think the first time he's been interviewed. You said that you challenged him about the burning down of schools. Later on, we're going to have a look at a piece which ran on Channel 4 News earlier in the year in which a school is burned down by Taliban on camera. Can I put it to you that your questioning of that spokesman was less than full on the issue of whether they were burning down schools? Would you agree that it wasn't a paxman?
Well, I said to him, "What on earth do you think you're doing?" There were two interviews in the Newsnight about the burning down of schools. In one, their main spokesman, who is a spin doctor who wants to portray a cuddlier image, and this is a new image that they're wanting to portray, said, "We are in favour of education." When I left him, he rather jokingly gave me a pen.
Sorry, you're fading, David.
But as far as the earlier interview was concerned in the field, the military commander admitted that they do burn down schools, whereas he said girls are dressed immodestly. So, I think in terms of the robustness of the interviewing, I don't think it was not robust, and I think I did manage to extract from the military commander the reality of the position on the ground, which the spokesman was trying not to disclose.
The reason I ask is I suppose the question is that when you go into a situation like this on terms agreed with a group like this, how realistic is it to think that you can conduct a full challenging interview without in some way being intimidated by the circumstances?
Well, I reject the accusation that it wasn't a challenging interview, particularly the interview with the spokesman. I did challenge exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it. I thought the really important thing that came out of the whole report, for me, was not, whether the Taliban are or aren't doing particular acts, but the conditions on the ground which British forces are fighting against. The thing that most surprised me was the corruption of the Afghan National Army that I witnessed taking money at menaces from people on the road, and the extreme anger of people in villages because of the civilian casualties that the worsening war is causing, which is obviously recruiting people for the Taliban. Now, all of those were things which are quite difficult to get if you're on a British Army embed, and it's very difficult to wander around in that countryside without the support of one army or the other. So in a way, what the Taliban said or didn't say, I think wasn't the important factor of this report. I think it's the conditions on the ground which are really making it impossible, I think, for the British to win this conflict in anything like a very long time, because of the surrounding corruption, the failure of aid policies, and the increasing civilian casualties of the conflict.
See? Okay, David, I'm told that the video is now ready to play, but one more question, and we'll let you get away because I know it's later at night with you. We're going to go on to talk about these overall issues of access to embeds and the row with ITN and the Ministry of Defence. What is your kind of overview from your Iraq experience as much as your Afghan experience about access? Is access being allowed and denied on good grounds to you or less than good grounds?
It's much easier with the Americans, although complex because the logistics are difficult, and embeds in Iraq never quite work out as you want them to. Things take much longer than you'd hoped for, but then they're fighting a very difficult conflict. There have been continual complaints by many broadcasters and journalists that the MOD in particular have been very controlling in terms of the kind of access that they give. The Americans are much more open, both in Afghanistan and Iraq, in terms of allowing people to see things that aren't necessarily on the main agenda. There seems to be much more of a desire by MOD minders to get a message out, and I think that's a concern, especially when, as we saw from the Mail on Sunday piece a couple of months ago, when soldiers gave pictures and gave their own account to Mail on Sunday journalists, they would like to see far more real reporting of real things happening on the ground. They want journalists to witness exactly what it is that they're facing, and there hasn't been enough of that kind of access.
David, thank you very much indeed. Fran Unsworth, I know, will be able to pick up on some of those points here, and we'll hear from the Ministry of Defence and indeed from Bill Neely. But we're very grateful to you coming through, and good night to you.
Okay, Stuart. Enjoy the evening.
Thanks. Right.